because we just started the recording. Good.
Yeah. And
Here we go.
yeah, I think yeah, I think we're wait just 1 second. Let me do one more operation here. Okay, I think we're ready.
Oops.
Okay, I hope you're all seeing the map.
I'm not.
No,
We're seeing you again.
We lost it.
Lost it, eh? Okay.
but you're looking good, John. I think you're ready for your
Yeah, Harold went to get his atlas.
Oh, okay. Good enough. Okay, so let's try this again.
There we go.
We're good.
Okay, good.
I'm so excited about this. Italy, your favorite country? I'm learning what this the unification of Italy is very interesting to me.
Okay, so we're off. So I'm just starting out with a little bit of geography, just the southern half of Italy. And we're going to go back to the 1400s, but let's at least get the basics down. The Kingdom of Sicily plays a huge role. And you'll see that. Here's Palermo, here's Syracuse, here's Marsala. All these places will have a role in our story. And then up the west coast to Italy, the Amalfi Coast, unbelievable. And the Kingdom of Naples, which is really the star of the story. And then on the way to Naples, you go through places like Salerno, which, by the way, was an early medical school that David Pepper and I visited on our way up. And then above that is Rome, which at the beginning of our story is a big part of the independent papal states, but by the end is not. So Spain is in control of this part of Italy for over 400 years. So that makes the history pretty simple. And you go into the details, it's not simple at all. But for our purposes today, just to make this something we can do in 1 hour, 400 years, Spain. And in Naples, this is the harbor. And this is St. Elmo's Fort on the hill. And we visited that. It was an amazing fortress. Charles V, who is a big story in the New World and has all these riches, he builds this fortress and kicks off the dominance of Spain, the Aragonese rulers, Charles V, and this is his two-headed imperial eagle. The House of Bourbon, they were originally a branch of the Capetian dynasty. And in the 1700s, the Bourbons were in control of France and Spain, but the other powers in Europe didn't like that much. They thought that that would make France and Spain too powerful. So the balance of power was what it was all about. So they fought a war of Spanish succession. And as a result of that, the Bourbons agreed to just rule Spain, and then Spain kept a hold of southern Italy. And we skip way ahead to 1559, and Ferdinand, who was the king of Naples as Ferdinand IV and king of Sicily as Ferdinand III. It gets pretty complicated, so you can appreciate that we need to make this simple. He was deposed from the throne of Naples, but came back. Napoleon's troops successfully conquered St. Elmo high on the hill. But he was restored with Metternich in 1815, and the great reaction of the monarchies throughout Europe at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. You can see how massive this place is on the hill. So it must have been through starving them out that he was able to get through. So things get a little bit simpler. They have Naples and Sicily become one kingdom, the kingdom of two Sicilies, which is somehow just as confusing. And it's ruled by the Bourbon Ferdinand the First. The terms of the victory in this succession was the War of Spanish Succession was that the stable branch would just rule Spain and southern Italy, and not France at the same time. So now the map is that. Let's see, we have somebody else coming in here. And off we go. There's two coat of arms now that are merged. The king of Sicily, the king of Naples, becomes the king of two Sicilies. And now, here's a wrinkle that's going to become very relevant. They're subservient to Austria as part of the settlement of the Spanish succession and the Napoleonic Wars. So Metternich again. At this point, we're talking about an absolute monarch, which doesn't go down well in Palermo. So there's an insurrection, no doubt thinking of the good old days when Napoleon was around. And the Carbonari are a secret society that's spread out all over Italy, but they're particularly effective in Palermo. At least they want a constitutional monarchy. This revolt, though, is suppressed by the Spanish monarchy with the help of Austria. They rely on Austria as security and police, and in they come. But we'll skip ahead, simplifying this. In 1848, the revolutions weakened Austria and Metternich falls. And this is often referred to as the first Italian unification. And so we're going to simplify what's going on in the North dramatically through the lens of 1848. So we've got southern Spain waiting for us, and let's go up north and get them up to 1848. So here's a dynasty that you maybe have heard about, the dynasty of the House of Savoy. And they were actually way up north near the border with Switzerland, around Lake Geneva. This is eventually going to become an engine for unification, believe it or not. But here's the way things were in 1494 with all at the time of Columbus, with all these small city-states that we're familiar with. But the only ones we're going to talk about now is Savoy, way up here, and then Genoa, and the city of Nice is going to play a big role in this story. And here we are, Nice, on the Mediterranean. And we'll come back and talk about a few of these, but believe it or not, all these are going to be unified by the end of our story under the Kingdom of Sardinia. What? The Kingdom of Sardinia. How does that work? The other thing that I learned about is the city of Turin. We had seen a very interesting Italian extended movie that was centered in Turin about the revolutionaries of the 1960s. So, but that's all I knew about Turin. And they play a huge role. The Duke of Savoy unites Sardinia into around their kingdom, which is centered in Turin. And the other word for this area up here in the Northwest is the Piedmont and Turin and Savoy. And all, I'm simplifying horribly, but it's all folded into the Kingdom of Sardinia. So after they take over Sardinia, they adopt that name. And you're going to hear that throughout the rest of the presentation. And it was the most economically advanced, by the way. They had used modern forms of agriculture and early industry. Victor Emmanuel, you're going to, if you've been to Rome, you have Victor Emmanuel all over the place. And he's the monarch that's going to be the organizing force that's going to pull many different parts of the urge to independence together. This is Victor Emmanuel II. Victor Emmanuel I had been part of reversing Napoleon's gains with Metternich. And so we're going to skip over that. But when Victor Emmanuel II takes the throne in the early 1850s, he wants to prove himself on the world stage. So he volunteers to join the Crimean War. And doesn't really accomplish much except watching 2,000 of his troops die of disease. But nevertheless, he's there at the peace treaty and able to put his vision at least on the table. It doesn't accomplish much, but this is his first step in that direction. And here is Nice, as Victor Emmanuel II is negotiating. He's going to wind up palling around with Napoleon III, who has just taken over and bought order after the revolutions of 1848. He's taken over in France, and leveraging his uncle, he takes the name Napoleon III. Victor Emmanuel and Napoleon gang up on Austria to finally get them out of Italian politics. They're weakened. Metternich's gone. And in this negotiation, Victor Emmanuel gives Nice to Napoleon III. Now Nice goes from being Italian to French. And you can see in the color of blue, that's what's going on there. This really makes a guy named Garibaldi quite upset, because Garibaldi, Nice is his hometown. He's Italian. Nice is his hometown. And all of a sudden, it's in France. And so he's charged up. You'll see he has been charged up about 15 years before that, and we'll get to that. But in 1853, this event, the 5 days of Milan, perhaps marks the starting point. It's certainly going to be our starting point, because we're skipping over the other stuff, but we'll start digging deep now. Milan is feeling their oats with the fall of Metternich, and they put up a resistance, barricades in the street. And now this is truly the first Italian War of Independence. In 1852, there's an aristocrat named Cavour. And it's his action that drives the diplomacy that made the Kingdom of Sardinia the driving force. So he's a big-time player. There's four of them, four big-time players, and he's the first, the second one we're meeting after Victor Emmanuel the second. Victor Emmanuel, though, is going to accept a peace plan with Austria that upsets Cavour, and he quits. As I said, Napoleon III has partnered now with the House of Savoy, the Kingdom of Sardinia, to review, and ousted the Austrians. And the
John, can I interrupt? Would be okay if I interrupt for a minute?
Absolutely.
Because the intrigue here is incredible. Cavour knows very well that his army, his puny little army, and no other army in Italy can possibly fight the Austrian-Hungarians. So Cavour has got to somehow manipulate the young and impressionable and looking for glory, Napoleon III, into a battle against Austria. And the intrigue is pretty clever. I mean, part of the intrigue is he sends the Countess of Castiglione to France, or she's already there, I guess. And Napoleon wants to sleep with her. And and Cavour convinces her to say, "Okay, fine, but you're going to have to fight Austria." So that's half of it. And then there's another even more and somewhat clever manipulation because Napoleon says, "I will help you against Austria. I'm happy to do that, but I'm not going to attack first. They have to attack you first." And so there's a long intrigue, not worth talking about, of how the Italians manipulate the Austrians into a silly little attack, and Napoleon says, "Fine, I'm in, and I'll defeat the Austrians. I'm done."
Okay.
There, apparently, somewhere in Paris, there is a Rue de Castiglione named after the Countess who slept with Napoleon III.
Okay. We'll have to look that up next time we're in Italy.
Sorry.
I did look something up as I was going along. Austro-Hungary. Actually, it's still Austria. Austria doesn't join with Hungary until later. I think it might be 1867, but it's not. It's not this early.
That's after the Franco after Bismarck invades. Yeah. After 1866.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So it's complex, all this, but it's about to get very simple. So the Piedmont is the springboard for Italian unification, to review. And here is the House of Savoy, the Kingdom of Sardinia, if you will. And it's the House of Savoy that's going to provide the kings of Italy. And you'll see some landmarks when you go to Rome on Emmanuel II. You can't miss them. And I'll show you what they are. Turin is going to briefly become the capital, the first capital of Italy. So there's a trivia question for you. What was the first capital of Italy? It was Turin. It wasn't Rome. It wasn't Florence. And let's see how that happens. So here are what the people, Victor Emmanuel, we've talked about him. We've talked about Cavour. And now we got to deal with these two guys, and they're pretty interesting guys. Mazzini has been around for decades. He is always been in favor of an Italian republic, which doesn't come into being until 1946, so long after he's gone. So he's the Republican. These two are the monarchists. And Garibaldi, this is Giuseppe Garibaldi, the most colorful of them all, is basically a Republican, but he sees that in order to get anything, he's going to have to compromise and work with Victor Emmanuel II and Cavour, and he does. And all along, the tension between Cavour and Garibaldi is Cavour's really fearful that Garibaldi's going to try to get Nice back, and so he's on tenterhooks. And what can he do with this very energetic radical who wants to do something in the name of Italy? And his brilliant idea is to get him out of southern area, anywhere near Nice, and send him to Sicily. And that's where the revolution's gonna start. But there's that backstory to perhaps explain it. So he had Nice always in his background, itching to come out. Earlier in 1834, he had participated in an uprising in Piedmont, which is mainly Turin, right? The Kingdom of Sardinia. And he had to flee. And where did he go? He went to South America, where he spent 14 years in exile. And like Che Guevara, he honed his guerrilla skills in Brazil and then Uruguay. And finally, he returns just in time for the revolutions of 1848. When he returns, he is seen as somebody who could be very valuable in the revolutions of 1848, which spill into Rome in 1849. And just like Mazzini wanted, a Roman Republic is formed, and he is the general and minister of war in the Republic of Rome. He has to retreat, obviously, with the reaction, and he winds up in the Alps, in a group called the Hunters of the Alps. And if you've ever seen pictures of his, and you will be seeing them in just a second, of his volunteers, the band of 1,000, they're wearing alpine hats. And that's always been a mystery to me. What are they doing wearing alpine hats? Well, he spent the intermission between the Roman Republic and his invasion of the South. He spent it hiding out in the Alps. Okay, so his decision, is he going to be a Republican like his buddy Mazzini, or is he going to go with the constitutional monarchy? And as a compromise, seeing what's possible, he goes with Cavour, disappointing Mazzini, who is in hiding. So he says, okay, I understand you want me to leave Savoy. You want me to get out of Dodge and not cause any trouble here in Nice. So I'll take your suggestion and your money, and I'll lead the expedition of 1,000. And with the consent of Victor Emmanuel, off they go. 2 steamships traveling to Sicily. And who's awaiting them in Sicily? Here is the latest Bourbon on the throne. We last left the Bourbons around 1816, but there have been some changes in the dynasty, father to son, and this is Francis II, who is reigning over that kingdom of 2 Sicilies. So Garibaldi lands in Marsala, right here on the western tip of Sicily. And if Pepper were here, he'd point out that his wife's family is from Marsala. And we got a lot of information about Marsala. So here he is. He's landed with his 1,000 in Marsala. This is the imagined heroic landing. And here he is with the tricolor in the harbor, which is a very historic harbor, by the way, as you can imagine. There was a lot going on there before he landed. And here are the red shirts. So in addition to alpine hats, they have red shirts. And these are the other players. And here are the uniforms. Garibaldi knew how to put on a show and how to organize and how to inspire. And uniforms and dress were always part of it. And he had 3 distinct uniforms in these different periods of time, all involving the search for unification. Within a few days of landing, there were volunteers coming out of everywhere, eager. Garibaldi's reputation had preceded him, and he proclaimed himself dictator in the name of Victor Emmanuel. They started fighting with the troops from Naples on Sicily, and they're going to fight all the way up to Naples. That's what's coming. So this enthusiasm, I've mentioned the movie The Leopard, and you'll see in that movie a very enthusiastic volunteer who is the nephew of the Duke. You'll see pictures of him later on. But he'll be wearing alpine hat, which had me scratching my head, but now I understand. And he'll be wearing a red shirt. Off they go across a famous bridge, and the beacon fires are lit. The generals from Naples gets 25,000 of his troops ready to defend Palermo. But first he softens them up with a naval bombardment, the siege of Palermo. And they via Toledo, we walked that boulevard while we were there. And this was the area of intense street fighting. Monasteries were damaged. And the prison was stormed and the prisoners released. All of us also, he took over the port, and the troops did not fight. And they eventually left. And that demonstrated to everybody the weakness of at least the Southern government. And Garibaldi's fame spread like wildfire. And he was the hero. There had been attacks on a convent, memorialized, and then the ultimate capture of the Fontana Pretoria fountain. And you'll see I think this is a guy with an alpine hat, I'm not mistaken. Certainly red shirts, and we went to that place, the Fontana Pretoria. It's being renovated while we were there. You can see neoclassical, surrounded by ornate buildings. And then it's off to Messina, and he marches along the coast, much as we did. We stopped at the beach, though, and off he went. And where's Messina? It takes him 6 weeks. He gets there, and he's coming across northwest shore. But then to get to the mainland, you cut across, and here it's only 3 miles, 3.5 miles. So it's not far. The garrison, the citadel in Messina falls, and he crosses over to the mainland. I want to throw this in because when you go into across a Sicilian border, you're likely to see the Sicilian flag, which is unique. And it's got what's called a gorgonion symbol. So what's that? It's ancient. It's been used on coins since the Hellenistic period. Probably first in Syracuse, where their ruler made coins. But it also has another providence. This one's got a spiral, and it's not obviously a leg, but it's a continuous spiral that's found in Ireland at Newgrange, which is as old as the pyramids. Astounding place. It's got lined up with the sun. So on a certain day of the year, the sun comes in. All very intricate, but it's got what something very similar that they call the Triskelion, a continuous spiral. So off he goes. He's on the coast here. This is the Amalfi Coast. It's quite narrow, but it's not that much of a problem now because everybody's surrendering. And so it's just all he has to do is personally get to Naples. And he's able to do that with a handful of his men, and eventually they take the train into Naples as the resistance faded along the way. As you go up this coast, of course, you have Pompeii and Vesuvius and Herculaneum, and so now we're back to our intro map. And now Garibaldi has gone all the way north, going through Salerno. It's all the way into Naples. And now what happens? Well, he just gets off at the train station and walks to the balcony, and people are cheering. He's there in advance of his army, and now Cavour is really worried that things are spinning out of control with Garibaldi in the position to conquer Rome. And he's not ready. Cavour's not ready for that, and certainly Napoleon III is not ready for a revolution that's going to throw out the Pope. So it's all hands on deck. And Cavour and Napoleon III figure, oh, we got to stop this guy. And Victor Emmanuel sweeps in personally into the battlefront. So now the issue is to make a deal with the Pope and see what they can do to forestall Garibaldi. So in summary, the Kingdom of Two Sicilies and the Kingdom of Sardinia merge to become something called the Kingdom of Italy, headed by the House of Savoy, the former kings of Savoy and the Kingdom of Sardinia. And presto, you've got a state. But they're still the papal states, and they've got an army. The Pope's been very, very active in martial affairs for centuries. And so what's going to happen? This is a summary of what we've already covered. Cavour encourages Victor Emmanuel to get over there, and Garibaldi respects Victor Emmanuel and gives up power willingly, avoiding a lot of fighting. On the other hand, just to flash forward, Garibaldi will go back years later, much like Napoleon went back. He will go back years later and try to turn Rome into a republic, but it doesn't work out. For now, Garibaldi, no doubt tired, and remember, he's been fighting in South America for 14 years. So he takes a step back and lets Victor Emmanuel unify the peninsula. And this is a famous meeting where Garibaldi greets him as the King of Italy, and quickly follows the annexation of Lombardia, which is, well, that happened earlier, Milano, where they're from. So now it's the Kingdom of Italy with the capital in Turin. So this is where the movie The Leopard comes in. Who does Burt Lancaster play? He plays an aristocrat who watches all this goings on. His nephew has run off and joined Garibaldi, but he witnesses how quickly his nephew switches from being for Garibaldi to being for Victor Emmanuel. And he's disgusted by the sudden reversal and the inconstancy. And he says, my nephew will be successful because he has no principles, basically. But what does Burt Lancaster do as a country gentleman, an aristocrat? He goes back to enjoying his comforts, but he's a man of the Enlightenment. He's got telescopes. He's got all kinds of scientific projects, and all of which is supported by the peasants. And he doesn't want to give up that life for the bourgeois. And in fact, it's his encounter with the nouveau riche which kind of disgusts him, but is also when he encounters the nouveau riche trying to pretend like they have the manners of aristocrats, he's highly amused. So the movie works in a number of different ways. It's confusing because he's Prince Don. He's Fabrizio. He's Selina. He's also Corbera, Prince of Selina. You have to get it's helpful to have Burt Lancaster there, as it is Claudia Cardinal. Very helpful. And she plays his goddaughter, who obviously falls in love with his nephew.
John, you're doing a great job. Push a little bit more on that, because this is exactly what's going on in Europe at the time. The nouveau riche are taking over Europe, and the Italian unification is part of what's going on. It's also going to happen in Germany. It's going to happen in Japan. It's going to happen in Austria-Hungary. So the revolution of 1848 finally comes to fruition, and Europe is utterly remade. Italy is just part of it. And so Metternich had allowed this class to stay in power for one more generation, but this was the end of it.
Yeah, and so the model that Italy unification sets for the world is German unification. And
well, the model was France, and Italy is just trying to catch up.
Yeah, but it's going to go most disturbingly to Germany. So the new Italy, Tancredi, who's the nephew, shifts his allegiance. He's an opportunist who will flourish. Now back to Turin for the opening of the parliament. The parliament will be in different places, Turin, Florence, and then Rome. But it'll last, this parliament, all the way to 1946, when Italy becomes a republic. And there's a movie out now that I'm going to talk about in just a second. All right. There's still Venice and the Papal States. They're going to join later. Garibaldi, he's offered a lot of money for his effort, and even a title. And he turns his back on it, and he sails off. He can't go back to Nice anymore because it's in France. So he goes and leads a rustic life on the coast of Sardinia. Takes with him just a very, very simple backpack. As I said, he tries to come back, but that's not successful. Cavour is satisfied. We got a nation, and it's a monarchy. Constitutional monarchy, but he's been a little bit upset with Victor Emmanuel, so he quits. He comes back. Victor Emmanuel is the guy that does the heavy lifting, and here's what he has earned. Sometimes called the typewriter, sometimes called the washing machine.
Wedding cake.
But when you're in Rome, this is Victor Emmanuel the second, not the first, and certainly not the third. If you walk into the Pantheon, which Aiko and I love, we were back after, what did we figure, 40 years? It's really changed. It's hard to get in now. And if you go, Victor Emmanuel's tomb is in the sixth chapel. And the Pantheon is now a Christian basilica. It was originally built as a pagan temple. So what happens to Francis II? He leaves, and this is described in the Leopard. I'll hustle up here. So the verdict, it was largely unplanned. It was reunification on the run, as opposed to Bismarck, who will be meticulously planning every step of the way. It's interesting, given the remarkable people involved, that it could actually be carried off, considering all the mutually hostile forces and the political fragmentation. And here is Franz Joseph. Julia was just reading about him. He's the big loser in all this. Remember, at the beginning, he was associated with Metternich, not directly, but Metternich has fallen. Austria has fallen. They're going to try to strengthen themselves by joining with Hungary. But there's no big reforms that come out of this. And his military, the people that bought us World War I, are going to be unreformed. And what if he had been less defensive? What if he had been able to stay active in Italy and not turn east to harass the weak Ottomans at Bosnia? What if? The other thing, there was a lot of enthusiasm from this victory, and it spilled over to believing that modernity's here, and we're all going to be swept on a tide. Yes, we have this benign nationalism with a constitutional monarchy. What could go wrong? And all those things pointed to disaster. But this is a big step along that path. This is in Versailles, the Hall of Mirrors. This is after the Franco-Prussian War, which German wins handily. Bismarck has figured out how to do this after about 20 complicated steps that he pulls off, as opposed to the spontaneous Italian reunification. This is very much conceived of by one man, and didn't lead to a good place ultimately. Here's Victor Emmanuel the third, not to be confused with the second. His father was Umberto. A lot of the streets in Italy are named Umberto because his father was assassinated. He was so tractable that he failed to put anything in the way of the fascist seizure of power, and he was quickly reduced to a figurehead. He surprised the world after Patton's and Montgomery's invasion of Sicily, which is portrayed in the movie Patton. You see Palermo, the race to Palermo, where Patton beats Montgomery and welcomes him, much to Montgomery's distaste. And he surprised the world shortly after that by having Mussolini arrested. The day after the Allied liberation, he relinquished the throne, put his son in, but not as a king. He kept that title for himself and left the world stage. This is the movie I was telling you about. This, spoiler alert, this is really about the vote to give women the right, and I think it's involved. I don't know the detail. I just saw the movie of making Italy a republic. This is a great movie. I think in our neighborhood we've had a few people see it, and it's basically about the movie starts off with a very brutal husband, and this is his wife and daughter, who both get pretty tired of his machoism. So that's where I'm gonna stop. And any more thoughts, Ramsey?
I guess it's worth saying that after unification, Italy does not do very well. At least southern Italy does terribly. And there's like 14 million Italians leave southern Italy for places that we'd be familiar with. One would be the US, but the other was Argentina. And I actually looked this up today. I was sort of curious about this. Apparently, there have been some comparative studies about how the Italian immigrants did in the two countries, and they did a whole hell of a lot better in Argentina than here. There was a massive anti-Italian campaign for decades, from the 1880s to, well, right after World War I, particularly. Whereas in Italy, they kind of took over, and including the Pope's family. The Pope's family left for Italy just about there. Everyone know the story a little bit? The current Pope Francis? His family had decided when Mussolini took over that they were leaving for Argentina, and they were to get on a boat, and but one of the family members got terribly sick, so they couldn't get on that boat, and that boat sank. And that would have, the Pope Francis would have never gotten to Argentina. So they took the next boat and he got there, and eventually became Pope Francis. But as those of you that have been to Argentina know very well, that it's almost more Italian than it is Spanish, especially the capital.
There's one more Italian that went to Argentina and did come back, and you see his face all over Naples. You see statues of him. You see kids wearing his T-shirts, and that's Maradona. Unbelievable. It almost makes me think that there was some kind of commercial idea. Hey, we can sell this. I mean, the murals on the walls, one of them is with wings flying through the air. It's unbelievable.
And there's always the word God underneath his name.
Dios. The first time I saw it, that's a good-looking guy they're calling Dios. But it became rapidly clear what was going on.
Yeah, sort of ironic that the Italian unification, which was stimulated by the loss of Nice, should end with Nice still in France. Some people argue, as a historian at Stanford, that World War I was really initiated by French perfidy to recover Alsace-Lorraine. And of course, World War I does, as horrifying as it was, does end with the restoration of those states to France. But the Italian unification does not. If you want to go back deeper in history, there's an exhibit now at the De Young Museum of the tapestries of the Battle of Pavia, which was 1525 when Francis I waged war against Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire over the same territory. It's Pavia is a city in the Duchy of Milan, and the French are defeated. The Francis I is taken prisoner and ransomed, but that's 1524. It's a few hundred years before, but that part of the world is object of a lot of contests through history.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Oh, they're fabulous tapestries, incidentally.
Okay.
And that exhibition is on right now?
Yeah, it's on right now. Worth
Oh, wow.
visiting.
Wow.
Just one more comment on the success of Italians who moved to Argentina or the United States. It may have depended on the geography of where they moved to. Both the Irish and Italians were very badly treated in New York and Boston initially, but not in the West Coast. They're the founders of political dynasties.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. Well, then those Italian workers helped build the Transcontinental Railroad, the eastern part of it.
The eastern part, Chinese on the western part.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, thank you, John.
Well done.
Okay, good. We'll see
You should be wearing your Garibaldi red T-shirt. And where's your
That was good, John.
yes, yeah.
and where's your hat?
Yes, exactly. Okay. All right. See you next week.
Take care.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.